You're listening to a CNA podcast.
A quick note before we start. Some of these stories are tough to hear, and some accounts may touch on what we call suicide ideation. So listener discretion is advised. Do reach out to a trusted adult or professional. We do have links in our show notes if you don't know where to start.
So after fighting 10 years of depression and anxiety and panic attacks, I couldn't take it anymore. And then I decided to kill myself. I went through 17 operations.
Looking back at that time in your life, do you think that was a turning point?
My parents were never understanding of depression. They just thought it was a phase. It was just a thing that kids say these days. So they didn't really take me seriously. They just thought I was gaining their attention.
You're listening to episode 2 of the special narrative series on the mental health challenges of young people in Singapore. My name is Crispina Robert, and in the last episode, I spoke to a friend who lost his son to depression. And experts weighed in on what's causing this mental health crisis among our young people. In this episode, I want to find out how parents, teachers, mental health professionals, and even peers can help offer a lifeline.
Then when I woke up, my first words to my parents was, why am I still alive? And I can still remember them crying very badly. Then after that, I went counselling at NUH.
That's Sneha. You heard from her at the start of this episode. The 20-year-old has been battling anxiety and depression since she was a teenager. We pick up where we left off in the last episode, landing in hospital after a suicide attempt. Sneha recounts how the time in hospital was very disorienting. She is utterly broken, not just physically, but her despair at knowing she was back to a reality she loathed. But this proved to be a critical turning point. As part of protocol, Sneha had to undergo mandatory counselling, and that is when she finally found a counsellor who made a difference.
So she came down every week, and then there are days when I cry. She was very on her feet. Even after working hours, when I text her, she replied to me. And then I ever asked her, I say, why you still reply to me after working hours? And she said that I just want to check whether anyone needs me now, and I'm going to go and sleep. So I just check my phone before I go and sleep. And I feel so thank you for doing it from your heart. Yeah, so she was constantly on her feet, making sure I do assessments, finding my way to life again.
In Singapore, the infrastructure for mental health services has expanded greatly. Just to give you an idea, every single school has 1 to 2 counsellors. Polytechnics and ITEs have an average of 6. And as part of the curriculum from primary to pre-university, there are lessons on stress management, emotional regulation, and resilience. On the health front, aside from IMH, which houses the Child Guidance Clinic, there is an entire network of private clinics offering psychological services. And by 2030, all 25 polyclinics and 900 general practitioner clinics will provide mental health services. On top of that, the Samaritans of Singapore, the National Suicide Helpline, has scaled up outreach programs to train more support staff. The aim is to ensure that if a child needs help, they don't have to go very far or wait very long.
We've actually poured in resources. The amount of spending for mental health has tripled since I started work, at least tripled, if not quadrupled. And there's a lot of support. I mean, the government has poured in resources, but it's not endless.
That's Dr. Daniel Fang, the CEO of the Institute of Mental Health, or IMH. He explains to me that Singapore takes a tiered approach, much like a triple layered cake, with each layer catering to the severity of conditions. General mental wellness is tackled at the community level, with schools for instance, where everybody is made aware of how to deal with stress and anxiety. The second layer is for young people who need counseling or therapy. And the topmost layer, the ones with the highest needs, come to Dr. Fang and his team. So clearly the commitment to help young people is unmatched and in fact set to grow. But the numbers aren't abating. Demand is still high. Parents and children still struggle. So what else is going on?
It's not just about the rising pressure, but I feel that in some ways it's also the reduction of that social support that we used to have.
That's Dr. Vivian Young, who runs Bloom Psychology after more than a decade as a psychologist at the Education Ministry. And she tells me that while this generation of children are more connected, they are also lonelier.
We had maybe a lot more social connections, more free time after school, because now there's a lot more after school enrichment classes and activities because parents are at work and I think they want to keep their child occupied, busy and so on. I would say the changing face of friendships is something that we see in young people. I've got a lot more young people talking about isolation, about feelings of loneliness.
Dr. Young jokes that even if her teenage son has a free day, it's hard for him to find friends to hang out with. They all have tuition, she tells me. The idea of young people being hyper-connected but deeply lonely comes up in my chat with Dr. Daniel Fang, the CEO of IMH. Kids, he says, are finding it hard to make friends. The kind you can call when you've had a terrible day.
We don't spend enough time these days teaching kids how to make friends and do the social stuff. We have a lot of stuff on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. Great, you are the best in the world. But what about making friends? Are we good at making friends? I'm not sure. For some people, there is a proportion, and maybe a third of kids, who will need to know, okay, if you make friends, you got to talk to them, introduce yourself, share a little bit. There's a vulnerability there, And if you live in small families where...
Maybe single kids?
Yeah, single kids or, your only sibling is your cat or your dog. School should not just be about science, technology, engineering, maths. And I'm repeating myself, but what's the use of being the top in PISA tests and not being able to care for your fellow human being?
Or not having a friend.
So those are the things that I think we need to think about. I know it takes curriculum time, so drop some of those things.
The National Youth Mental Health Study released in 2023 identified 3 key factors that reduce severe symptoms of anxiety and depression in young people: resilience, social support, and self-esteem. But as any parent or expert would say, that's easier said than done.
One thing I look at that can be done better at a very early age, are we arming our kids in terms of ideas of vocabulary on mental health? Instead of just throwing it now in their faces, you need to be resilient. I hate that word. Our kids lack resilience. It's not resilience anymore. Our kids just do not know how to deal with these new feelings, which we don't really talk about. That it's okay to be down.
That's Sean, the friend who lost his son to suicide when he was 17. We talk about resilience and what it means in the face of intense pressure that some young people face in Singapore today. Sean grapples with the pain of not knowing why his son lived with feelings of deep inferiority, of not measuring up or disappointing his parents.
You get what you pour in, right? So if you're already stressing them out in some way, then this comes up, So again, that's why when I look at my boys, why all this inferiority and where did it come from? I think as parents, the first thing you need to do is just create an environment at home that is so welcoming, that's so loving, that focuses on being able to articulate how you feel from a very onset and then build from there.
And love you as you are.
Dr. Young explains what resilience means and why there is no perfect formula.
So that's the question, why is it, you say some kids can take it. So when we look at the studies on resilience, right, the key ingredient is really about that supportive adult or supportive relationships that the child has. Some people think that, kids these days, strawberry generation, it's because they've not gone through any hardships life is too good for them.
Yeah.
They don't have to fight for anything. They're born with like everything that they need, and that's why they're not resilient and so on. Actually, if you look at the research, continued hardship in the absence of a supportive environment may not necessarily result in resilience. So if you go through a lot of adversity in life without the support, it could result in trauma and negative mental health outcomes. It's not like the absence of challenge, obviously. So they're going to have some challenges, some adversity that they have got to go through, but we have to make sure that the level of support they get is proportionate.
What does support look like? It's in the smallest things, she says.
I've got kids who tell me that my parents don't care about me. They only care about my results. And I say, what makes you say so? When I come home, any homework today, right? That's the first question. Second question, your spelling, how? What about that test, right? And I think parents, obviously, that's not what they care about. But maybe in the business of our work, right? We come home after work, we're tired. We have very, very limited time with our kids. And maybe to us, it's like, I want to check the boxes. So I would urge parents, if you only have 10 minutes, to maybe talk to them about other things.
As a parent, I will be the first to admit this is hard to do. If you ask your teenager how his or her day was, you are likely to get a shrug and a monosyllabic, okay. So for young parents, Dr. Young has a tip.
We start them young, and we start like tradition of asking certain questions and then sharing about our day too.
Yeah.
Right? So for parents to take the lead, to say, one thing that made me happy today was this, or one thing that made me feel sad today was this happen, and so on. So we often encourage talking about emotions, talking about something that made you feel a certain way that day, and it doesn't have to be positive all the time because, life isn't all about positive emotions, and we want to normalize being able to share about things like that. And if you start them at a young age, then you realize that becomes a lot more natural over time.
Dennis Combe, the MOE Master Counselor, goes a step further to say, hold space for difficult conversations. The unpleasant, awful feelings that can bubble up in young children.
It is important to make effort to connect with the children. Sometimes you may not always understand fully or agree with the children, but I think having that listening ear, been around for them, and hold your judgment for a while so that the child can be able to express what is really deep inside them, how they think, how they feel. I think that's very important because if we don't get to that level, sometimes the kids will just shut up and do their own thing. And when they have stress and difficulties, they will not come to you. And they deal with it themselves, but sometimes they deal with it themselves in a very dysfunctional way that can be hurtful.
And this is where we come to the final bit of this puzzle. When a young person struggles, they may shut out adults in their lives. But there's one place they almost always turn to: the wide open digital space, and in particular, social media. Here's Sneha.
Social media is definitely the biggest enemy. Really, be your body type, be your skin color, be it like, I don't know, the job or whatsoever, right? When you see social media, right, it's like your expectation. And plus influencers, right? Like kids nowadays, they turn to social media for like everything. They don't watch the news, they don't watch the TV. Social media is everything that they grew up with. So when you don't hit that expectations, you will tend to feel mentally low of yourself.
Okay, I'm thinking that it's impossible to cut social media, right?
Definitely.
I can't live without my social media.
I also can never.
You all cannot, right?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I do in the morning is I scroll through Instagram.
Exactly. Few books get to be the kind of parenting blockbuster than the one published in 2024, written by Jonathan Haidt. It is called The Anxious Generation. He argues that the use of smartphones and social media, coupled with an overprotective parenting style, is rewiring childhood fundamentally. And all of this explains why there is a rise in mental health struggles among young people. I asked Dr. Fang for his take.
I think we have to be careful. What will happen is if you develop a mental illness or you are at risk of mental illness, the use of social media might be a catalyst, just like the pandemic was a catalyst. Pandemic's not the cause of mental illnesses arising, it's the catalyst, creating
It's
the
the
environment.
fuel.
I don't think that you can get away today with social media without any guidance. I think that some controls need to be in place. Today, I think that the lack of controls are worrying. And the question is about what age, right? And when.
But the absence of digital devices requires parents or caregivers to fill in a child's time with other activities. And honestly, if both parents work, that can be quite a struggle. And this becomes harder as kids become teenagers and rely almost entirely on their devices for communication with their peers. Here's Dr. Young again, the child psychologist.
So a lot of parents struggle with this when they try to remove it from their child, when they try to restrict, they get meltdowns, they get
Big fights.
threats. Like if you take away my phone, I will do something scary.
Dr. Young agrees it is a delicate balance. She sees very bright children who through social media become aware of mental health issues, and they book appointments with her without their parents knowing. But on the flip side, they also tell her something surprising.
I've had quite a few teens who told me they wished their parents restricted them. They wish they did not have access to social media from a young age. Because with the older teens, they would have realized they could reflect back. So they said things like, it totally corrupted me. I knew too much, too young. So I completely feel that we should try to delay social media specifically, delay that as long as possible.
Sean, who is also an educator, sees this among his students.
I may sound like an old fogey here, but I think our lives were so much better when we didn't have handphones. It's a significant factor because now kids don't interact. It's all online. We have lost that power of communication in a way, that personal touch. That has a significant effect on how we develop mentally as well. When you don't have things like comment sections and all that, it invites people to have a view and articulate it, negative or positive. Tendency is everyone goes for the negative. Why? Because you decide to open yourself up. So I'm going to tell you in your face whether I like it or not. And then you can't cope with criticism. You can't cope with the comments. You breed a lot of self-doubt.
Self-doubt and negative comments take a beating on a young person's self-esteem. This is something Sneha and her friend Navita experienced too. But for them, social media is also a way of life, a way to connect, a way to communicate. So the question is, how do you tame the beast? Here's 19-year-old Navita talking.
So I think it really comes up to having the capacity to fight it and be like, actually, you know what? So what? People are going to say what they're going to say. Everyone has a say. But it depends how you're going to take it also.
And this is where good old-fashioned talking can help. And parents, a trusted adult, teachers, all can play a big part in it.
Sit down and talk to them, have a conversation with them, be a bit more friendly with them, and help them understand what are the pros and cons of social media and how they can get out of a situation if they get into a situation. Actually, now I think children, they have to be taught how to deal with social media better.
It is clear to me that there are no neat answers on how to tackle the mental health challenges young people face in a society like ours. But in my conversations, many of them hours long, I have come away with a deeper appreciation of the value of sharing our struggles openly. Something Sean says strikes me as poignant, but true. Because his son died of suicide, his family had entertained the thought of having a very short funeral. The fewer questions, the better. But Sean was adamant. He wanted to celebrate his son's life, which was full and rich with love, affection, and devotion. In Sean's mind, his son's life mattered as much as the devastation of his death, and it prompted him to step out. He decided to post publicly about his son's death on Facebook.
3 hours after I posted it, I was getting messages from so many friends or friends of friends who suddenly say, I'm going through this now with my daughter, or I'm going through this with my son. How did you do this? How did you know? It made me realize that, oh my God, we are not alone. So for me, it was like more the reason I want to talk about it. It's difficult for me because maybe I may have something that may have helped. Maybe there's something that might click. I've never shied away from talking about it, but if we had that earlier, maybe that might have helped.
If you or your loved one is struggling, there are links in our show notes. Take the first brave step and seek help. This episode was written and produced by me, Crispina Robert. Editing by Tiffany Ang. Our social media editor is Joanne Chan. Sound engineer is Saye Win. And sound mixing by Ken Delbridge.